Chapter 2. Line them up, Sergeant! Is that the best you can do? What a scruffy lot! Get in line there! This slightly portly gentleman who, in the plain, had been so soft-spoken with his Scots soft burr, was now a bellowing maniac. "What's your name?" Bartonecket. "What?" Bartonecket, sir. A horrible name for a horrible little man. Keep an eye on him, Sergeant. Now listen here to me, you scruffy lot. I have been given to understand that you gentlemen are used to having boys to do your dirty work. Well, let it be understood, from now on, the next 6 months, the only boy you will see will be the one you see in the mirror. His words ended in a high-pitched scream. There was a silence. Then came the soft, low-voiced throat clearing. His trademark. Right, carry on, Sergeant! The genial, friendly Scotsman in the Dakota had turned out to be our Scots Guard Sergeant Major Cameron, nicknamed Uncle Joe, or Rumbleguts. He had a habit of clearing his throat. Sometimes this habit saved a recruit from disaster because it warned of his imminent approach. Also, of course, it lent itself to imitation. Many were the times a cadet whirled around to attention, colour draining from his face at hearing the dreaded to find a colleague grinning at the success of his mimicry. There were 4 barrack rooms, each sleeping 25 recruits. The 3 of us from the bar in Nairobi were delighted to find ourselves together in number 1, under Sergeant Unsworth of the Yorks and Lancs and his Black Watch sidekick. Sergeant Unsworth's claim to fame with the first batch of trainees, January to June 1952, had been to win the Champion Squad trophy, and he was determined to do it again. He believed smartness in uniform and on the parade ground were the basis of barrack room and team morale. So we discovered that extra drill sessions could be required of us. And while he was no guardsman, he was himself extremely smart and expected the same of his squad. He was a good soccer player and easy to get on with, a leader who could get the best out of his men. In the barrack room there was 6'3" red-headed, affable George Henry, the best Uncle Joe mimic, Sid Maskoff, a black-haired, broad-shouldered, slim-hipped fitness fanatic and natural comedian, Danny Louis, a cheerful, smart Afrikaner with a cheeky little moustache who could start up a song at any time with his guitar. Looking round at them all, I decided I was extremely lucky to be with such a crowd, and the 6 months might be quite enjoyable. The sporting scene was quickly upon us, and our tall, lean, fit, fair-haired, youthful company commander, straight out of Boy's Own, Major Tony Lewis DSO of the Dorset Light Infantry, reputed to have been the youngest colonel in the war, seemed to have identified me early as potential for the rugby team. In one of our first practices, however, I cracked a thumb. This had to be plastered, which effectively ruled me out of rugby for a time. It also kept me out of the boxing. Our physical training instructor was keen that the unit should compete against Rhodesians in a competition due in a few weeks' time for novices. The PTI looked and sounded as if he was heading for retirement before long. He called everyone laddie in a high-pitched voice, caused, so rumour had it, by a throat injury from boxing. I had boxed for 5 years in UK, as captain of boxing at school and later in the ABA. In UK, amateur boxers remained in the novice category until they won a novices competition, so they could be experienced, capable boxers still called novices. I wondered if the same applied in Rhodesia and started to get uneasy about the PTI's inadequate preparation of the cadets. In our barrack room, Mike Pease, who by now had been nicknamed the Major because of his fruity, upmarket voice, was due to take part, and I spent some time coaching him. In the event, the competition was a disaster for us. Of our 12 entries, Mike gained a draw, and the only winner was Abby Morton. Abby, an Afrikaner, noticed after one punch to the stomach that his opponent did not seem to like it, so gave him another, and the fight was stopped. What a humiliation! 1 win out of 12 bouts. Of course, at age 23, besides sport, girls were of some importance. I met Norma, the daughter of a good quality Scots family. After 10 years' religious indoctrination at school, I had come to believe it was immoral to risk getting a girl pregnant. I was still a virgin, knew something of necking and petting, and little about sex. Norma and I were fond of each other, and met when we could, which was not often. We recruits were kept stretched with training activities each day. One day ran into another. The Fiddler on the Roof song, sunrise, sunset, went round and round my brain. There seemed to be little time for anything not directly related to our army training. While in Rhodesia, we were struggling with our army training. Back in Kenya, the settler representatives were struggling with their colonial masters. On the 10th of July, in Legislative Council, Michael Blundell moved a motion. This council notes the increasing disregard of law and order within the colony and protectorate, and urges the government to take the measures necessary to improve the situation. He wound up a long debate. I hoped, when I moved my resolution, that I would see in the member of law and order a man of resolution. I must now record that I do not think we saw that man of resolution. I cannot help feeling that I saw a man, skilled in law, tilting and lancing over legal niceties. I must say that because I do not think the situation will be improved unless we have the intention to improve it. One morning the barrack room was abuzz with the rumour of a beauty competition due to take place in Salisbury that evening. I was not very enthusiastic. "Oh, come on, Ozzy, think what you'll be missing," exclaimed Ken Dando. "No, I can't be bothered. I've got to get my boots polished up for tomorrow morning." "All right, Ozzy, you'll be sorry." So I sat in a semi-deserted barrack room, half-heartedly polishing my boots, while the taxis of cheering cadets took off for town. Next morning I was awake early. "Hey Arthur, how did it go last night?" No reply. I turned to the other side. "Hey Neil, come on, tell me, what went on? Were there some lovely dames?" "Shut up, Ozzy," Francis's voice called from across the room. "They were a bit young for Arthur." And so the story came out. At some expense in their taxis, the large gang of recruits had surprised the organisers by turning up enthusiastically and loudly to a Girl Guides gala, asking when the big girls were appearing. No one ever admitted to having started the rumour. Salisbury was an ordinary, newish colonial town, built with the avenues at right angles to the streets. It boasted a lovely hotel, Michael's Hotel, which years later I heard referred to by a world traveller as the best hotel in the world. Around Salisbury, Rhodesia did not appear to be very picturesque. It seemed to be flat and arid, as someone put it, black ants, white ants, and Scotsmen. And where there are white ants, there are anthills, of course. These littered the countryside. The Rhodesian Africans seem to have been educated well ahead of the Kenya Africans. There was no lingua franca, they all spoke English. Already some of them were running their own businesses. Early in our training we experienced the flip side of the army. Our training was in good hands, and yet there was this flip side to be seen. We went out onto the Rhodesian Army Nkomo training ground. There we were introduced to the Bren gun. An instructor lay down behind it and set about demonstrating what it could do. The season was dry, the ground covered with long brown grass and dried up bushes. Usually with the Bren gun there was a trace around every few bullets, so the gunner could see how well aimed his automatic bursts were. Soon a small wisp of smoke arose behind the target. "Sir, sir!" shouted the Kenya cadets. Stay still, what's the matter with you?" "Sir, the grass is on fire." By the time the British officers and NCOs recognised the danger, it was too late. Throughout the night, with units of the Rhodesian army, we fought to put out or contain the fire. We burned fire breaks, but by morning there was little of anything left to burn. The training area of thousands of acres was totally blackened. My God, what an experience! We couldn't get within 100 yards of the flames, and that was just grass and bushes. What must a forest fire be like? I mused. At parade next morning, our kit was required to be spotless as usual, so we learned how to cope without sleep. One day we were all lined up for a session of square bashing to be taken by Sergeant Swinhoe of the Coldstream Guards when Uncle Joe appeared. It was not uncommon for him to have been supping on a dram or two. This day he swayed forward and announced he was going to have some fun by picking a recruit to run the drill. "Let's see now, let's take the most horrible little man here. Barton Eckett, come here." There was a stunned silence. Nobody moved. "Barton Eckett!" he bellowed. Again, not a move. As was the custom, his target, being small, was hidden in a middle rank. Uncle Joe's eyes roved over the recruits. He moved forwards to get a better look. Suddenly he saw his man, and his move forward broke into a surging trot as his beer gut jumped up and down in front of him. He got under way. "Stand still!" came the voice from the nearest sergeant. But the target's nerve broke. Who could blame him? In a panic he burst out of the ranks and was last seen scampering round a corner of a barrack room with Uncle Joe in hot pursuit, brandishing his baton. Over the next day or two, our colleague learned how to turn the grime-encrusted cookhouse pots into gleaming utensils that a major hotel would be proud of. At school, my nickname had been Aussie, and so it was here. On my left slept a staunch friend, Arthur Crowther, who had played lacrosse for England. Extremely fit, he was enthusiastic to have a go at anything. I walked into the barrack room one day to find him in a furious confrontation with another cadet. Each had taken some serious blows to the face and eyes. Arthur explained he had caught the other looking through my bedside locker on the pretext that he had lost some scissors and thought I might have picked them up by mistake. Arthur was not having that for an excuse. With the pressures of discipline, the training, the tidiness required, etc., interpersonal stresses developed into animosities. Such animosity grew between me and Franz Boet Odendaal. He was in number 4 Boet, and I had squared up in the scrum at an early rugby practice. He was a large, mustachioed Afrikaner, well over 6 foot, with a loud, boastful voice and cocky demeanour. The two of us were worlds apart in background, schooling and interests. To him I was a Ruinek, who should be put in his place. Ruinek was a description of scorn used by Afrikaners to depict an Englishman suffering from the African sun and wind. A Kenyan of British descent would more likely call an Englishman a pommy or pom, because his colour resembled the colour of the red pulp of the fruit of the pomegranate tree. And so the niggles went on, and I developed a real dislike for Boet. Then the day arrived that released the tension for me, and I was able thereafter to look at him in quite a relaxed way. We were starting night exercises under Captain Tony Barkas. Captain Barkas was officer in command of 1 and 2. Of medium build, he was an excellent sportsman, international hockey player, and married to the sister of one of our recruits, whose family had a farm in Nanyuki. He had a positive, genial approach to everything and obtained from us all considerable respect and liking. The format for this particular exercise was that squads 1 and 2 would attempt to infiltrate the camp of numbers 3 and 4 during the night. This was to be followed in the dawn light by numbers 3 and 4 charging numbers 1 and 2, who would by then be in their trenches. That night I took 3 colleagues with me round to the back of the enemy and managed to infiltrate their camp. Unfortunately, what we had taken to be their HQ turned out to be their kitchen, so it was that our thunder flashes blew up absolutely nothing of importance. "Ha! Aussie, you useless Roynick!" shouted Boet. We returned disconsolately to our positions to dig our trenches. There we waited in the cold for the night to lift and 3 and 4 to charge at us. I was totally fed up by now. I enjoyed night exercises, and this one had gone wrong. The night added excitement got my adrenaline going, and all I managed to achieve this time was to blow up their kitchen. So I crouched in the trench, blank cartridges in my rifle magazine, peering without much interest at the noise of 3 and 4 making its advance. Slowly my eyes started to focus on the enemy. Could it really be that my luck was in after all? Wasn't that Boet's bulk making its way towards me? Suddenly the air was alive with screams as the enemy charged. Those general screams were as nothing compared to that of Boet as he leapt over my trench and received a blank at close range right up his backside. It burned a hole right through his trousers, blistering his rear end and other parts of his anatomy. "Aussie, where were you this morning?" "Me, Boet? I think I was way away from where you got your ass burned. Does it hurt much?" "You bloody Roynick, I'm sure you had something to do with it." And so the training went on and on. Map reading exercises out in the African sun, hot, dusty, sweaty, exhausted, sometimes lost. Back to more drill on the barrack square, including the slow march which Uncle Joe seemed much to enjoy, and which I found particularly difficult to master at the best of times. "Sergeant!" screamed an apoplectic Uncle Joe. "You've got a man there who's shat himself or something." I felt dizzy, as if I had been in the sun too much. Nothing to worry about. "What's the matter with you, Aussie?" "Don't know, Sergeant. Feel dizzy." "All right, you better drop out and report sick in the morning." It was considered more than your life was worth to report sick, but that night I vomited green, or some other colour, which the Kenya lads claimed to be symptomatic of malaria. So I reported sick and went to bed for a few days in the small barrack hospital. The army had not considered malaria to be a serious risk in Salisbury, certainly not at that time of year, so no preventative medicine or mosquito nets had been provided. The hospital orderly came to see me one day. He was worried for Mike Pease. Mike was so keen to go to the UK for a short-term officer contract that he would fall asleep over his boots while polishing them. This would be long after the rest of us had gone to sleep, satisfied that ours would pass the early morning inspection. "Your friend Mike Pease is in for a big disappointment." "Why?" "I've just discovered he's colour-blind. He'll never pass his medical this afternoon." "Oh, come on, surely we can organise something." "What do you mean?" "Well, what happens in the colour blindness test?" I hold up a red sign and then a green sign for him to tell the doctor which is which. "Well, can't you arrange a signal with Mike, like 1 tap for red and 2 taps for green?" And so he did, and at the end of our 6 months Mike went off to become an officer in the Green Jackets in the UK. He was posted to West Germany, and when on leave in the UK, as I suggested, he took out my sister Valda in his scarlet MG sports car. Also, he told me later, in inter-unit boxing matches, he'd used effectively the right hook I'd taught him. The officers and NCOs were beginning to understand the Kenya recruits and became affectionately disposed towards them. However, as the appreciation grew, so too did the constraints. No Swahili was to be spoken at any time. This order was to stop any inter-cadet communication that the English trainers could not understand. One day, having half an hour with nothing better to do, a group of Kenya recruits set about enjoying themselves, pretending they were trade union rabble-rousers down at the Mombasa docks. The exchanges went thick and fast, all in Swahili, roars of laughter and lots of noise. Out of number 2 barrack room came Sergeant Glover, Grenadier Guards. Sergeant Glover was the archetype of a guardsman of the "they died with their boots clean" genre. With a ramrod back, he was spotlessly clean and smart on all occasions. He was not, however, the most flexible of thinkers, and on this occasion was very uncertain whether or not some of the recruits' rebellion was taking place. The leaders of that little escapade were to be seen the next day scrubbing the parade ground with toothbrushes. The "Swahili will not be spoken" order was reinforced. Besides Sergeant Glover, the other guardsman was Sergeant Swinhoe, Coldstream Guards. These two put on a display of precision guard duty drill. We watched and indeed admired. So the training went on, route marches, films. There were lectures from Captain Coots, the education officer, from which I learned that the combustion engine follows the sequence suck, squeeze, bang, blow, never to be forgotten. We learned the rules of engagement in aid of a civil power. Apparently, when faced by a riotous mob, we had to sound a trumpet 3 times, at intervals, warning the mob each time through a loud hailer to disperse. If they failed to do this, then we were allowed to fire at selected ringleaders. I couldn't help wondering when this procedure had last been followed. In the Indian Mutiny? We were required to make short verbal briefings to our colleagues about our jobs or hobbies. From number 1 barrack room, Noel Brownhill, a horn-rimmed, bespectacled banker, who was later to receive the OBE for his bank work around Africa, taught us how to make out a cheque so that if it went astray, it could not be cashed by anyone. This was a briefing of practical benefit that I never forgot. The padre talked to us and explained that, in his opinion, if a bullet has your name on it, then you get it. I was astonished. This seemed so contrary to my traditional Christian learning. What was the point of all the prayers for victory in the last war if God could not influence events on earth? That day started questions and gradual disillusionment with religion in my mind. I felt my life in UK had been so soft when I thought it had been so hard. The Caulfield report revealed later that on the 8th of August, the District Commissioner, Rumaruti, had sent a special intelligence report on Mau Mau to the Provincial Commissioner, Rift Valley Province. In this district, and also in all districts where the Kikuyu reside, I feel that an emergency has arisen and that this emergency should be admitted and strong measures should be taken by means of special legislation to meet. If this is done now, it is possible that an extremely dangerous political movement will be brought to an end before it has caused serious bloodshed involving countrywide attacks on European farms adjacent to Kikuyu reserves, or in districts where Kikuyu labour are to be found in large numbers. Unless strong action is taken immediately, while there are still many Kikuyu who are, I am certain, waiting in exasperation and frustration for government to take a strong line against this society, which it has deemed to be proscribed and contrary to good government, then it will be too late and the situation may become out of control. On the 13th of August, the Provincial Commissioner, Rift Valley Province, attended a meeting of the Executive Committee of the Thompson Falls Association, attended by Mr. Humphrey Slade, the Member of Legislative Council for the Aberdares. In his report to the Member for Law and Order, the Provincial Commissioner ended up by writing, "I gave this meeting a resume of what measures were proposed by the government to eradicate Mau Mau and what success had been attained. In spite of this, the meeting was adamant that a state of emergency existed in the colony." On the 15th of August, Norma and I celebrated my 23rd birthday. Sir Philip Mitchell had relinquished the officer of Governor on the 21st of June, and Sir Evelyn Baring did not take it up until 30th of September. For over 3 months, Kenya was without a governor. We had an inter-squad swimming competition. It was obvious that the Kenya lads, particularly those from the coast, swam the crawl extremely fast, so I entered for the breaststroke and gained some points. To play sport was an important asset. The advantage of playing sport for the company was that the officers would sometimes be more lenient, After all, one had less time than others to get one's kit into good order for inspection. At one inspection out on the parade ground, I knew my rifle was not properly cleaned. Captain Burkus peered down the muzzle, looked me squarely in the eyes. "Better than usual, Osborn," he said as he passed on. At school, I'd never been coached at cricket. I had watched it, and as far as the batting was concerned, it seemed to me that if one went right forward or right back, it was not too difficult. We had some cricket trials at which I played reasonably well. An early match was against a Rhodesian army side. At 150 runs for 2 wickets, the Rhodesians were obviously going to win. Sid, our captain, turned to me. At practice sessions, my slow left-arm bowling had been flayed to leg. So I put Arthur, who would die before he would drop the ball, Sergeant Swinhoe, no guardsman would ever drop the ball, and another good cricketer around the leg boundary. Then I bowled my slow left-arm swingers across the bat down the leg side. In quite a short time the innings was over, and I had 6 wickets for 30 runs, all caught on the leg boundary. At hockey, the first batch of 100 Kenyans had swept all before them. Hockey was a sport at which Kenyans generally, with their strong Asian influence, were particularly strong. As goalkeeper, I had played for the school and for Surrey schoolboys. Our unit performed adequately only. There were some highlights among the boredom. Edward Tin Ribs Ironside, a member of our barrack room and descendant of First World War General Ironside, announced that he was getting spliced. His girlfriend came down from Nairobi and they were married in a church near the barracks. The previous night, poor Tin Ribs had to be blackballed with the shoe polish, of course. At the church I did a double take. It couldn't be true. Surely I knew her. Yes, it was Jean, Bernard Mock's nursing sister. I thought Bernard would be lonelier than ever from now on. Arthur chartered an aeroplane for 30 of us to visit the Victoria Falls. I was familiar with what the Victoria Falls looked like. Dad had worked for the London office of the Rhodesia Railways all his life. At that time, the Rhodesia Railways had owned the Victoria Falls. At home, our playing cards had all been backed with a photo of the Victoria Falls. Now, standing at the top, looking at the everlasting rainbow and watching all that water tumbling over was an unforgettable experience. Dad had given me names of some people to contact in Rhodesia. I found no time for them, but did meet up with 2 friends from my old school, King's Canterbury. So the 6 months passed and the training neared its climax, which would be the Champion Squad Trophy. In number 1 we had Peter Kruger, who was a problem where drill was concerned. One of the youngest recruits, he was the sort of lean Afrikaner one could imagine surviving the heat and drought of Africa by chewing a biltong, while his long legs covered miles at an easy stride. Unfortunately, this long, easy stride was not the 30-inch precision required on the parade ground. He had the greatest difficulty in putting his feet down in time with a military march. So, hour after hour, we put him through extra training up and down the barrack room. We decided he should go in the middle rank where any deficiencies would be less obvious. The squad became attached to young Peter. He didn't complain. Contributing marks towards the trophy would be our shooting performance. I had shot .22 rifles at school and 12-bore shotguns when farming. Here each cadet had his one chance to earn marks and get into the marksman grade with rifle and Bren gun. I had collected a liking for the Bren and was eager to become a marksman with it. There were 4 Brens being used, of which I decided quickly only one was really accurate and properly zeroed. And that was not the gun I was standing in the queue behind. I saw cadets' first bursts missing the target. They then aimed off to hit the target, ending up with an average score. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and aimed straight at the bull all the time. To Captain Barkis's astonishment, I had no hits at all. What's the matter, Osborn? I can't shoot with this gun, sir. There's only one decent gun here. Captain Barkers was bewildered. Which one is that, then? Number 3, sir. There was a silence. All right, Osborn. I'm not meant to do this, but at the end you can have another go with number 3, and you'd better bloody well get a possible with it. And so it happened. Every bullet hit the bull, and I was graded marksman with the Bren gun. News from the kraals, news from the kraals, shouted Uncle Joe with a grin as he threw copies of the East African Standard around for the recruits to pick up. Other than letters from home, this was really the only way for recruits to keep in touch with what was going on in Kenya. Hugh Wilf Gelton Fenzi, whose father had a plinth in his memory at the top of Delamere Avenue for building the Mombasa-Nairobi Road or something, exchanged a letter every day with his fiancée, but he was an exception. The field exercises worked up into a crescendo. In one of them, a selection of recruits would choose teams by rote. To the officer's surprise, my first choice was Abbey. I ignored the obvious top cadets, preferring to choose those I considered most likely to be useful in the field. The sense in this was borne out in a thunderstorm that night, during which we had to dig trenches ready for inspection at first light. Abbey produced a candle and some matches from under his poncho, by which we were able to dig quicker and more accurately than the other teams. In the morning we were standing ready for the enemy, while the other teams had barely dug down 3 foot. There were marches, long-distance runs, and increasingly arduous physical training sessions. I've been asked to put forward a name for PTI, physical training instructor, so I've put your name down, laddie, all right? I was taken aback. To be a PTI would not be a way to my objective of becoming an officer. So we talked around the subject. I never did find out if my name was put forward. Inter-unit basketball appeared for a time, and though I knew little about it, I managed our Kenya recruits team, which beat every team in the barracks. We were due to put on a passing out parade practice in front of the visiting Rifle Brigade Regimental Sergeant Major. Uncle Joe was determined that this should be impressive. We put small coins into our rifle magazines so that when we slapped them during parade movements, they would make an impressive rattle crash. And remember, this will be your last march off, and it will be to Colonel Bogey. So sing yourself bollocks and the same to you, etc., etc. I don't care what you think of me, just stride out with pride and sing bollocks to yourself as you march off the parade ground. All right, dismiss them, Sergeant, and remember, I'm relying on you, so sing bollocks. Number 1 squad did win the champion squad trophy, and we got horribly plastered that night. Wilf disappeared under a table, happily still singing, "My father's a sergeant, a sergeant, a sergeant, a fucking fine sergeant he is." From number 1, Mike was going off to UK to join the Green Jackets, and Eddie Arnier was joining the paratroopers. Our time in Salisbury was coming to an end. I went and said a mournful goodbye to Norma, who somehow had not realised our parting was coming so soon. We were now 3 days from flying back to Kenya, when the most wonderful, the most powerful, the most terrible thing happened. I fell completely, disastrously in love. The Whams had attracted the attention of the Kenyans. Willie Botha was due to marry one. Somehow, for some unknown reason, I found myself down at the Rhodesian Army officers, and there met Ingrid, who did secretarial work there. To me, she was the most lovely girl I had ever met. It was love at first sight for both of us. We spent every possible moment together. Francis took photos for us to keep until we could be together again. The news from Kenya was not good. It sounded as if the Mau Mau flames were turning into fire, and we would be returning to military service in the field. Ingrid was the only child of a widowed Swedish mother. She was a Roman Catholic and agreed to look into the problems we might have in a mixed marriage. She had fair hair, frank grey-blue eyes, was absolutely beautiful with freckles. They call me Icebox Ingrid because I won't get involved with anyone, but I'm not. It's just that, until I met you, I have never been in love or sufficiently attracted to anyone. I went around in a daze. We saw the film With a Song in My Heart, starring Susan Hayward, and adopted the song Blue Moon as the signature tune of our romance, with its words, "Now I'm no longer alone, without a dream in my heart, without a love of my own." So the 3 days disappeared as in a dream. Then the Dakota was bouncing its way north to Nairobi. "Carry me back into the old Transvaal, that's where I long to be. There are 40,000 bastards in the old Transvaal, but you can't blame the Kenya boys for that. Funga safari, amri ya nami, amri na bwana captain, amri ya ka. Nairobi is the place for me, Nairobi, I love you so." All the obligatory songs were sung to Danny's guitar. You'll never go to heaven in an old Ford car, because the old Ford car won't get that far. We talked about what awaited us. Firstly, there was to be another passing out parade in Nairobi, so the Europeans could be proud of their sons and relations in uniform. We touched down at Nairobi Airport. Mick Contanias from our barrack room, who had been called cartoonist by Uncle Joe because he could not remember his name, was a small, pockmarked Greek with a strong Kenya-European accent. As we moved away from the Dakota, Mick grabbed Noel by the arm. "Noel, will you please look after my bunduki for me?" he asked. Slightly startled, Noel agreed. We then saw the reason for the request. Mick was swamped and then engulfed by female relations, laughing and weeping at the joy of having him safely back home in the family. Then there was the question of what unit to apply to join. My training report read, "A very keen, conscientious type of man with an eye for detail, absolutely honest and trustworthy, has leadership qualities, and is a good all-round sportsman." Although I had worked hard at Swahili, I couldn't claim yet to be fluent. This seemed to rule me out of the King's African Rifles, where it was said that any European started as sergeant, with first promotion taking one to officer rank. For me, it seemed that the Kenya Regiment units themselves would be the most suitable. So I applied to serve in the Kenya Regiment units. This would mean, almost certainly, that I would have to start as a private and work my way up. Again, the flip side of the army showed itself. I was posted to C Company, which consisted mainly of up-country Kenyans and a high proportion of Afrikaners. I didn't know much about the Catholic Church, having only once been to a Catholic service. That was in Switzerland when I was 17. My memory of that service was that it was all in Latin, except for the request for the collection, which was in 4 languages: French, German, Italian and English. Anyway, while in Nairobi I went to a Roman Catholic priest to get information regarding the problems of mixed marriage. He provided me with relevant literature and intoned, "There are many paths up the mountainside, my son, but there's only one that goes to the top." I wondered what my various clerical teachers in Canterbury over my 10 years there would have said about that.